تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين اللهم اجعل نياتنا خالصة لوجهك الكريم لله تعالى. I ask Allah Ta'ala to grant us all the sincerest of intentions, the ability to understand the religious knowledge, and to get the reward in the hereafter for all the good deeds that we do. Thereafter, since it is the case that our sources of our religious knowledge, meaning for a person who wants to know about what it means to be a Muslim, what our religion orders, what it means to believe in Allah Ta'ala, what are the obligations set by Allah, and the prohibitions, we look at the sources for our religion. And they are namely the verse of the Qur'an revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the statements and actions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so there is a need then for one to be able to know how to approach those said verses and the hadiths of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so that a person can ensure that they are understanding them in the proper way, as well as knowing what our limitations are of trying to grasp certain religious texts, because a person is needing to be humble enough to know that they require knowledge, they require some guidance, they require some rulings that they are able to follow in order for one to know then what it is that our Lord created us for, and what it is that we are ordered to do and what not. So our religion is not a difficult religion, meaning this is not knowledge that is not attainable, because otherwise it would be a difficult religion if, for argument's sake, only the scholars could attain it, or only the elite Muslims could attain it, for example. Rather, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came with a religion accessible for the doctor, as it is accessible for the farmer, as it is accessible for the accountant, as it is accessible for the street worker or street sweeper, for example. Each and every one of those can be a pious Muslim. Each and every one of those can have a high status with Allah Ta'ala, regardless of their academic background, regardless of their social status, but that's through knowing about the religion and then implementing and applying that knowledge that one acquired. Okay. There we go. So the subject of this particular lesson is to look at some of those different types of verses in the Qur'an, and also then to know how to navigate them so that a person is safe from trying to misunderstand them, understand our limitations for them, and how to tackle them, let's say, in order to understand them in the proper way. And so for that, there is an important verse that we're going to start with, in which Allah Ta'ala revealed in Surah Al-Imran, in verse 7. Allah Ta'ala revealed, هو الذي أنزل عليك الكتاب منه آيات محكمات هن أم الكتاب وأخر متشابهات فأما الذين في قلوبهم زيغ فيتبعون ما تشابه منه ابتغاء الفتنة وابتغاء تأويله وما يعلم تأويله إلا الله. Here there's two ways of reciting this verse. Either we stop there and it has one meaning that we're going to mention, or a person continues the recitation and says, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ يقولون آمنا به كل من عند ربنا وما يذكر إلا أولو الألباب. So this verse, Surah Al-Imran, the third surah of the Qur'an, Allah Ta'ala revealed within it, Allah is the one who sent, literally says to you. Who is you? Who is the one that's being addressed in this verse? Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The book, the kitab was revealed to you, O Muhammad. Which book was revealed to our Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam? The Qur'an. Different books were sometimes revealed to different prophets in the past. For example, Prophet Musa alayhi salam received the Torah. Prophet Isa alayhi salam received the Injil. Prophet Sheeth alayhi salam received some scriptures. Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam received some scriptures. As for the final and the lasting book, meaning the only one that Allah Ta'ala preserved from any sort of tampering and perversion, was the book of the Qur'an. So since the time it was revealed to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, until our days, not a single letter has been changed. Not a single word or verse of the Qur'an is different to what was revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so the verses themselves have an unmatched authenticity, meaning that no one can come and say, and no one has even come and said, even among the idol worshippers at that time, that the words themselves are wrong. They don't make sense. They are not correct. We can come up with something like that because they were unable to. So this was a miracle for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that a book revealed in the language of the people that he was living amongst, who were experts in the Arabic language, heard these verses and were unable to come up with anything like it. They were not able then to say that this is something that's like our speech. We can make up something like it. We can come up with something like it. We can mirror it, for example. They were unable to. Even the shortest surah of the Qur'an, the Arabs at that time who had reached the pinnacle of eloquency in the Arabic language were challenged by Allah in the Qur'an that if you claim this was not the word of God, if you claim that the Prophet ﷺ is lying that this is revealed by God, then come up with something like it. Discredit him, disprove him, and they were unable to do so. So the verses themselves are accurate, authentic. No one argued throughout the centuries that these were the words that were revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You might say, well, what issue do we have then? The Quran is clear, it's authentic. The issue that we sometimes have is that firstly, the Quran was revealed in which language? The Arabic language. While the majority of the Muslims now throughout the world don't speak Arabic. And even those who do they have the necessary language skills to equip themselves to look at the eloquence of the Quran and the verses and to say, I know exactly what this verse means. I know exactly what's meant over there. That most of us, perhaps, if not all of us, have gone through some sort of academic education. And along the way, we've done some literature and read some books. Even though we speak English, grew up speaking English, know how to speak English, know how to read a book, there'll be usages in certain books that we're like, I wonder what he's trying to say there. Why the author wrote it like this? What does that line of poetry mean? I know the words, but the way those words are put together in a language I know, I can't explain that to you. Then you've got certain usages, idioms, we call them, turns of phrase that are used in a certain context to mean something different to what I literally am saying with my mouth. So we have to give the regular example, like I said, when we end today, can everybody give me a hand? The literal wording there is, everybody give me their hand. And what I mean by that, and all of you know because you know Arabic, you know English, and you know usages, I'm asking for your assistance, your help at the end. And so the Arabic language is not different, meaning that there are usages, there are figurative speeches involved, included, there are metaphorical, there are phrases that are used that are known by the Arabs, which if you were trying to take them into another language, the meaning might be lost and it wouldn't make sense to you. So before even we take it into another language, we're looking at even in Arabic, there is something that is included in the Qur'an that shows there are more than one type of verse. Allah Ta'ala revealed within what the Qur'an are verses which are muhkamat. We're going to give an individual definition of what that means. But what firstly, there's one type of verse called muhkam verse. Hunna ummul kitab. Allah Himself revealed in the Qur'an, they are the foundation of the book. They are the basis of the book, the Qur'an. Meaning in terms of you wanting to know what can I rely for my belief on in terms of believing in Allah and His attributes, believing in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his attributes, knowing what is an obligation upon me, knowing what is sinful. Do I want to leave those things to chance? Do I want to be 80% sure, 90% sure, 98% sure that my belief in God is valid? Do I want to be having any doubt whatsoever? I don't, because what's the alternative? If I am wrong in my belief in Allah and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then my end will be somewhere I don't want to go or end up. Therefore, I need to rely on something which is strong and reliable and authentic for me to feel safe. This belief of mine is correct. I have got solid proofs. I have got evidence that makes me convinced that my belief in Allah Ta'ala is sound and correct and is the one that Allah will accept from me in the hereafter. I don't want to die and wake up, meaning being resurrected, thinking I was on the right path when in reality I was not. And that's not, again, we said, something unattainable. That the knowledge is not completely lost somewhere, that we are striving in the darkness, for example, wondering what that knowledge is. It is available, but now more so than before, further effort is required to find the people of knowledge and to acquire it in the proper way. So first and foremost, the muhkam verses are the foundation. Foundation, as we know, means something upon which other things are built. What are the other things? And the other verses are mutashabihat. Those are the second type of verses. I said, inshallah, we're going to give an individual definition of both. For now, we're saying what? There are two types. Muhkam, mutashabih. If you want to quickly refer to them in English, let's say explicit and implicit. So muhkam, if we refer to that as explicit, and mutashabih as implicit, but with the specific definition that we're going to give. Which of the two is our reliance, upon which we depend, upon which is the foundation of the Qur'an? The explicit ones, the muhkam verses. Then Allah gives a warning. Whoever has zayg in their hearts, zayg refers to a type of illness of the heart. They've got a tendency to want to go away from the truth and rather do what they want to do, to support what their opinion is. So they have some deviancy. They're not those who say, for example, whatever the evidence says, I will follow that. Whatever has been confirmed for me in the Qur'an and Hadith, that is what I will follow. That's a person who is humble to the truth. But then there are those who say, this is what I think the correct thing is. This is what I believe is correct. My opinion is guiding me towards this being what is correct. And I want to try and find some proofs that support what I believe and what I think is correct. Not, this is what the evidence is, and I will put my opinions and my thoughts to match what has been confirmed for me. Rather, they say, I think this is right. This is what I believe is correct. Let me find something out there, some verse, some hadith that matches what I believe is correct. So what do such people do? Allah has informed us in the Qur'an. Whoever has deviancy in their hearts will not follow the muhkam verses, will follow the mutashabih verses as their base. Why? Seeking corruption and seeking to whimsically interpret. That either they want to cause fitna, they want to, for example, give meanings to verses that is not their meaning, so that Muslims become confused. People who want to know what is the correct meaning, they look at what others have said, what this verse means, and they're given a wrong meaning for it. They've assigned something incorrect for it, and it causes corruption. And then you get people saying, oh look, the Qur'an says this. And what they present to you is what? A translation. Or an incorrect meaning, and people get lost and confused. Or they seek to whimsically interpret. That refers to what I was saying before, meaning that according to their hawa, according to their whim, their desires, they want to say, this is what I believe is correct, look, this verse supports me. And the verse doesn't support them, but they choose to interpret that verse in a particular way that seemingly matches what they are saying. And then you get people saying, no, that verse supports me. Another one says, no, that verse supports my belief. And then you get, again, some confusion among people when each of them is saying, well, my belief is backed up by the Qur'an. And this person says, my belief is backed up by the Qur'an. And the third says, my belief, I've got evidence for it in the Qur'an. They can't all be right, because the Prophet ﷺ came with one religion, came with one belief, came with one set of rules. Yes, in some things there are differences of opinion. Can you combine or shorten your prayers? How you wear your khuf, for example. How far can you travel before you can shorten your prayers? Things like that. There were differences of opinions amongst the scholars, but not in terms of what it means to believe in Allah. What are the attributes of God? That they are not created, that Allah was not created, that Allah does not change, that Allah does not resemble the creation. This is something that every single prophet of Allah came with. This is a belief that every single companion had. That Allah is not two, He doesn't have a partner, He alone deserves to be worshipped. He is not bound by limitations that the creation are bound by. This is what the sound, correct belief is, supported by the Qur'an, of course. So clearly then, you can't have verses that are saying there are two gods. You can't have verses that say that God looks like me and you. You can't have verses that say that God has bodily organs and limbs and parts, because that goes against then the belief that the Prophet ﷺ had and that the companions were on. So what issue then is it that people have with looking at such verses? Well, the issue firstly we said is that people are relying on the wrong type of verse to substantiate and to prove the belief that they have in Allah and the Prophet ﷺ. So these verses, knowledge of the meaning of those verses, which verses? Mutashabih. What do we say those were? Implicit. Why are we saying implicit? Explicit means what? Even in the language. Clear, obvious, apparent. You don't need to kind of read between the lines. That's what we mean by a muhkam verse. A verse whose meaning is immediately clear when you read it. You're not left to wonder, I wonder what they're trying to say here. I wonder what that means. Does it mean that, or does it mean this? Let me look for some context, for example. You don't need any of that for the muhkam verses, which are what? the foundation of the book, which are what? The majority of the verse of the Qur'an. Meaning then, the majority of the Qur'an is clear for those who read it properly, who have some grasp of the language, so they're able to access it in the proper way. But the others are what then? Implicit. So if it's not explicit, it's implicit, meaning then those types of verses which upon reading, the meaning is not immediately clear. It's not clear cut. Why is it not clear cut? What's stopping it being clear cut? In the language, there are words used in that verse that can have more than one meaning. So you're left to wonder which of the two meanings is meant here, or which of the three, or which of the four. Even in English, you've got words like hand that have many different meanings. Foot, many different meanings. Foot can mean your physical organ, bottom of your leg. You can say foot of the bed. Means something else. And so there are verses which are mutashabih because according to the language, they can bear potentially several different meanings. How are we going to tackle them? How are we going to know what they mean? Allah ordered us to refer to the foundation verses. Meaning what? If you want to know the meanings of the mutashabih verses, check back with the muhkam verses. Why? Because they can't contradict each other. So if you want to know what the mutashabih verses might even mean, look at what the explicit verses are, and you will know that it doesn't mean something opposite to that. Because it can't. You can't have a book that has contradictory meanings, and we're supposed to follow it. We're supposed to use it as our guide. We're supposed to use it for our safety in the hereafter when we don't even know what it means. And nobody can know what it means because it's got contradictions and none of us have access to the correct understanding. The idol worshippers would have laughed at the Prophet ﷺ if that was the case. But it's not. Allah Himself revealed in the Qur'an, لو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا. That had the Qur'an been revealed by other than Allah, you would have found many differences and contradictions in it. But there aren't any. Idol worshippers would have tried to expose the Prophet and said, look, he's bringing you a book that doesn't make sense, O people. He's telling you there are verses here, and look, this one contradicts that. They would have laughed at him. And people would have had a reason then to reject him. But none of them said that. Because that is not the reality. So, who knows the meaning of those verses? The mutashabih verses. Allah Ta'ala revealed knowledge of the meaning of those verses, which are what? Implicit, is exclusive to who? Didn't we say there are two types of recitation? Either we stop at the name of Allah. وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ. That the only ones who know the true meanings of those verses is Allah. Full stop. If that's the meaning, then what type of knowledge are we referring to? Some knowledge that Allah Ta'ala did not grant to any of His creation. No prophet and no angel was granted some of the knowledge of Allah Ta'ala that is exclusive for him. Such as what? Exactly when the day of judgment is going to happen. Like the exact date, exact time, exact day, exact hour. Even though Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us about signs of the day of judgment, that when they occur, this will signify the closeness of it. He did not give us a date. He did not give us a figure. He did not say 2072 and on a Friday and 3 o'clock, for example. He didn't say any of that. And we said there are those who try to explain these types of verses that only Allah has knowledge of. So you've got people like the Jews, the Mayans, for example, who say, for example, because of knowledge of the stars and certain numbers of page numbers and verse numbers and the like, we can tell you that doomsday is going to be 2020 on 7th of October, and they try and give you an exact time, even though this is knowledge that was exclusive for Allah, and He did not give to any of His creation. Is that clear? So there are some aspects of knowledge, and therefore some verses of the Qur'an that truly the knowledge of them is exclusive for Allah Ta'ala. What does that leave us with? وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ, those who are well versed in the knowledge. Muslims who have acquired the religious knowledge, what do they say? They say, we believe in the Qur'an, both types of verses, muhkam and the mutashabih. Why? All of it is revelation. All of it was revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All of it is from our Lord, and we accept it. We don't reject it. We don't deny it. Because Allah revealed it to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and it's clear, it's authentic, the Qur'an was not changed, and so we abide by it. We follow the muhkam verses because they're clear and cut, clear and explicit. And the mutashabih verses, the implicit ones, these scholars would say, Allah knows best what they mean. Because remember, as a Muslim, you are not obligated to know the meaning of every single verse of the Qur'an. There's no pressure there. You're not duty bound to know what every single verse and every single letter and word of the Qur'an means. There were even companions who heard the Qur'an from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam who did not know the meaning of some verses. That didn't lower from their status. That did not mean they were misguided or ignorant. Some had knowledge of it and some did not. So that means then there are some types of verses, the knowledge of which is exclusive for Allah. Therefore, we as Muslims, should we try to delve into what those meanings might be? If Allah has informed us, you're not going to know exactly when the Day of Judgment is. Should you then be trying to exert effort and say, but I want to figure it out? I want to know though. If you've been told you're not going to be able to, and you've not been granted the means to, that should be where we put our limitations. But those who say, nah, that's not good enough for me, I want to try and work it out, there must be something out there, you will get to a wrong conclusion because you've not been given the necessary knowledge. In the same way that the Prophet ﷺ said to us, no matter how hard you try, you are not going to be able to imagine Allah in your mind. Fact that was given to us, a rule that was given to us. You are not going to be able to imagine Allah in your mind. It should be then, full stop. I'm not even going to try because I can't. But those who say, but surely there must be a way. Maybe them people are not trying hard enough, I'll try a different way. And they try to think it through, are they ever going to reach a proper conclusion? Is that person ever going to be able to say, yep, I've got it, I've imagined God, and be correct in that imagination? No way. So in a similar fashion, a person then should be then accepting of their boundaries and limitations, that there is some knowledge that has been kept hidden from us. To be able to understand our limitations, our weakness, our need to rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in some things, but the vast majority of the Qur'an is accessible to us. Because we said most of the Qur'an consists of what type of verses? The explicit ones. As for the second type, the second recitation, which is what? وَمَا يَعْلَمُ تَأْوِيلَهُ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَالرَّاسِخُونَ فِي الْعِلْمِ. Which means then, that if we, let's say, remove those brackets, would mean that the knowledge of the meaning of those verses is exclusive to Allah and those who are well versed in the knowledge. Certain scholars were given knowledge about the meanings of verses of the Qur'an. Like who? Like Ibn Abbas. Who was Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma? He was the cousin of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He had an uncle called Abbas who embraced Islam. His son, who was the first cousin of the Prophet then, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, used to stay in the house of the Prophet when he was young. And among the habit of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam was, at night he would get up to pray. So when he would get up to pray at night, he would fetch a container of water and make wudu from it. One night, as he got up, as was his norm, to make wudu and pray, he found that container of water ready and waiting for him. He didn't have to go and fetch it from the well or from somewhere else. He found it waiting for him to make wudu from. He said, "Who brought that for me?" And they told him that was your young cousin Ibn Abbas. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in his happiness with him, supplicated for him. He said, "Allahumma allimhu al-kitaba, allimhu al-ta'wila wal-hikmah." That, oh Allah, grant him wisdom and knowledge of the meanings of the verse of the Qur'an. And the scholars of Islam, like Ibn al-Jawzi, said, Allah answered that supplication. So Ibn Abbas himself used to say, Allah granted me that knowledge. Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu anhu, who is he? The second Caliph, the second greatest companion after Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu. During his caliphate, he would sometimes gather some of the knowledgeable and elite companions so that they could review meanings of the verse of the Qur'an. And Ibn Abbas was still young, and he'd bring him in as well. So some of the other companions would say, "But we've got sons as well. You don't invite them in. But why are you bringing this young boy in when we are not bringing in our young cousins and young sons and the like? And why does he get a seat at the table?" You weren't objecting per se, but wondering, like, what is it about him that has pushed you to bring him to a session like this? And he would say, because of the knowledge that he has in his heart. So he would ask the companions, "What have you heard from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam about what this verse means?" So he would go around. Then he would ask Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma, hear the answer and say, "That's what I know as well." Meaning he would take by what he said as well. He wasn't just there for numbers or to show that he actually cared about what he had to say. So he was among those who was granted knowledge of the verse of the Qur'an. What knowledge? Not about when the day of judgment is going to happen, because we just said that was knowledge that was exclusive for Allah, and it is not granted to any creation. This refers to then the implicit verses whose meaning is not immediately clear, and you require knowledge to be able to know what those verses mean. So some verses whose wording is ambiguous. Does it mean this or does it mean that? It's got 2 potential meanings, 5 potential meanings. Some words in Arabic have 15 meanings. Which one are we going to go for? Is it for me and you to decide? No, that clearly requires knowledge. And it's not even, for example, let's say there are some verses that, as far as the language is concerned, have befitting meanings for God and unbefitting meanings for God, as far as the language is concerned. So let's say there is a word, like let's say the word wajah. Wajah, in the Arabic language, one of its meanings is what? Face. One of its meanings in the language is face. The word wajh is used in the Qur'an about Allah. So let's say it's got a linguistic meaning that does not befit God. So we can cancel that out then clearly. And it's got 4 potential linguistic meanings that befit God. Which one are you going to go for? Do you decide? Do I decide? On what basis do I go for meaning 3 instead of 1, 2, and 4? I need to know the context of the verse. What's before it? What's after it? Who was it revealed about? What era was it revealed in? Was it revealed in Mecca? Was it revealed in Medina? Was it revealed about the non-Muslims? Was it revealed about the Muslims? All of that needs to be known. Was there something that occurred and as a result of it, this verse was revealed? Clearly, all of that requires knowledge. For someone to be able to dare to say, this verse revealed by God means this. Clearly requires knowledge then for someone to have the audacity to say, I can tell you what God meant by this verse. It's not for everyone then to do that. What does that lead us to the conclusion of then? There are two types of implicit verses. One, the meaning of which is only known by God. And the second, the meaning can be known by some of the knowledgeable Muslims like Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma, among others. But what are we saying that we are going to use and should be using to base our belief about Allah upon? What type of verses? Explicit. The muhkam verses. Everyone clear up to that? Sorry, let's move on then. We said we'd give a standalone definition for the muhkam verses and the mutashabih. So the verses of the Qur'an that are muhkam, these are the verses that according to the rules of the, not English, not French, Arabic language, only have one meaning. Does not make life much easier. That you're not going to fight with anyone, argue with anyone about what the verse means. It's clear, it's only got one meaning. And they are sometimes known as explicit verses, or verses whose meanings are immediately clear. And as we said, it makes life so much easier for the Muslims that you have a base, the meanings of which are very clear. Anyone who has grasp of the language at least can say, it's clear what Allah is ordering me with here. Or, it's clear what this verse means. For example, Allah Ta'ala revealed, وَلَمْ يَكُلْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ, which means Allah does not have a similar. The person reads that verse and say, I wonder what that can mean. Does it have some hidden meaning? It's clear, Allah does not have a similar. Nothing like God. You're not wondering then, I need to know what came before it to wonder what that means. Now there are some verses, for example, that all it says in that verse is, then he looked. That's all it says. ثُمَّ نَظَرَ. That's the complete verse. Then he looked. Can a person read that verse and say, I know exactly what that means just by looking at it? Or clearly I need to know, who's he? I need to look at the verse before. What's the context? Were two people mentioned? What's he looking at? What was the reason for him looking? All of that is required to be able to know what that single verse means. So one needs to be wary then of what are the muhkam verses and look at them accordingly. And the other one we said are the verses that are mutashabih. So these are the verses that according to the rules of the Arabic language can have many meanings. As far as what? We're not saying they actually mean 10 things. As far as the language of Arabic is concerned, the language that the Qur'an was revealed in, it can have many different meanings. Clearly we have an issue here. If it has 5, 7, 9, 3 meanings, me as a Muslim, I'm wondering what they mean. But who is qualified to assign those meanings? Assigning meanings to these verses requires thorough thinking so that acceptable meanings are given to them. So for example, firstly, I need to know what all those potential meanings are. If that's what the word means in Arabic, let's say a word has 10 meanings in Arabic, and I want to assign a meaning to that verse. If it's got 10 and I only know 7, I might be missing something out and rush to say this verse means this, and it might have been one of those 3 potential ones that I've missed due to my ignorance, due to my limited knowledge. So again, a person needs to be humble, a person needs to be clear about their limitation. If I've taken a crash course online on Arabic, or I've read a few books, or seen a few videos on YouTube about some words of Arabic, am I suddenly going to say, I'll tell you now what this verse means in the Qur'an? I can explain what God meant here by this verse. That's now transgressing your limitations. That's being now audacious in a way that you're not allowed to in the religion. There were even companions, like who? Abu Bakr. Who's Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu? The first caliph and closest companion and granted the good news of paradise and what's the one I get to? The greatest companion. Let's dissect that meaning for a second. We are informed that the greatest of nations was the nation of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that as a group of people that ever lived, the greatest ones were the companions. So Prophet Isa had companions, Prophet Musa had companions. Some of them were pious and elite. The best of all of them was Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. Take that further. What does that mean? It means after the prophets of God, who were the best creations that ever lived, after the prophets of God, the best man that ever lived was Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. He was once asked, O Abu Bakr, the verse, وَفَاكِهَةً وَأَبَّا. I know what fakiha means. It means fruit. What does the word abba mean in this verse? Another companion was asking him. Who? The best man that ever lived after the prophets of God. He said, which sky will cover me and which earth will hide me if I speak about the book of God, about that which I do not know? He was saying, I don't know, and if I dare to give you an answer, who is going to hide me from the punishment of God? Which sky is going to cover me? Which part of this earth will try and hide me from the punishment I would deserve if I was to give you an answer about a verse of the Qur'an that I do not know of? This is Abu Bakr. Him still saying, I don't know what it means, and I'm not willing to give you an answer. Was he not knowledgeable? Did he not know Arabic? Was he not God-fearing? Could he potentially have looked it up? Maybe. But he said, I'm not willing to give you an answer. My limitation is here. Clearly then, this is not a job for everyone, to assign meanings to verse of the Qur'an. Whether it's literal translations, or even those who say, I'll give you a full-blown meanings of it. I'll give you a 5-volume book and 10-volume books. But what are they basing their knowledge on? Especially if they don't even have the basic condition, which is to master the Arabic language. We don't mean know it, master the Arabic language. It means you know not only what all of those words mean in the Arabic language, but how do you use them? I'll give you an example. When I was studying Arabic, by the way, poetry and what they call balagha, which means looking at the eloquence of Arabic, was my weakest point. And one of the reasons was that you needed to have a grasp of usages of Arabic in the way that the Arabs speak. So there was a line of poetry in what was mentioned that we were studying once, and they were talking about a man who was being praised. And the way that he was being praised for his generosity is they said that his dog is a coward. They said he has a cowardly dog. That's literally a jabeen kalb. And I'm wondering and trying to understand it, and even the initial explanation that was given, I'm like, what are you on about? You're trying to praise what? The generosity of a man by saying he has a dog that is cowed, meaning a dog that doesn't bark. Then they break it down for you. In the past, the Arabs, especially in Mecca, it was known to be a land that was like the equivalent nowadays, like a transit city. A place that travelers would stop, take rest, spend a few days, for example, then move on and continue their journey. So people, like even amongst the non-Muslims at the time, amongst the Arabs, generosity was a well looked up to trait. Bravery in battle was something that everyone praised and looked up to. So generosity they would vie for. They would want to be generous to one another. And what was among the ways that they were generous? They would look for travelers and invite them in. They would give them a place to stay for the night. They would give them food to eat, for example. And many times they would not even charge them. You'd have the equivalent of inns and rest stops and like old school motels and hotels and the like. But some would want to show off their generosity and say, come to ours. You'll find a bed for the night. You'll find food to suffice you. So imagine you've got a dog. Is it not the case that many times if somebody new comes to the house, the dog usually barks, gets excited. Who's at the door, for example? Someone new. We're not used to guests. They said this individual, the dog has become so used to guests coming time after time, due to how generous his owner is, that when a new guest arrives, it doesn't even move now, it doesn't even bark. So you know the meanings of those words? A cowardly dog, but it's used in the context of showing the generosity of a person. How would you know that if you didn't know that's the culture of the Arabs, for example, and to say something like this about a person is actually high praise? Clearly then, there needs to be knowledge of the way the words are even used in Arabic. What we're showing here then, we have limitations. Someone presents to you, I've got a translation for you. Read it by yourself and you know what God revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's not as simple as that, and it can actually be dangerous, because you might read one of those translations, think this is what God revealed and meant, and in reality it isn't. And so this is to only be done by the qualified scholars, and not even every scholar. Some scholars would say this is not for me to do. They'll be knowledgeable about rulings of the religion, about the belief in Allah. This is tafsir, meaning assigning meanings to verses, not for me. And so we need to understand that. So, we have a general rule then to follow firstly, which is that the verse of the Qur'an all agree with each other in their meanings. What that means is that sometimes a word might suggest some sort of apparent contradiction, but the meaning can be, if you like, what's the word? There's a way for you to save the meaning and make it make sense. So if I said, I want everyone to leave this room, and then I say to Adil on the side, I want to have a quick word with you though before you go. So somebody says, everyone has left the room Adil is still in there. Nabil has kept him in there. He's lying. He told us a lie when he said he wants everyone out of the room. Or you can say, he said he wants everyone out of the room except for Adil. He made an exception. How do we know what the exception was? Well, he's told him, can you stay? So there are sometimes verses then that give a general meaning, and there's another verse somewhere else that restricts that general meaning with some exception. So for example, there are some verses that say, those who don't believe in Allah, in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, will go to hellfire. And they were also taught that there might be someone who did not believe in Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and embrace Islam and can go to paradise. So what does one say? Hang on, you just said if you don't believe in God, you're going to hellfire, and then you just said if you do believe in God, you're going to paradise, and this person did it at one point and did now. How do you combine between the two? There is another verse that says, those who do not believe in Allah and the Prophet ﷺ and die on that state, then they are the ones who will not be forgiven by Allah and would go to hellfire. So is there a contradiction in those verses? No, in their meanings. So one needs to be also careful. You don't rush to say, oh, this verse says this in Arabic, and that verse says something else. That doesn't sound right to me. Slow down. There must be some way to combine the meanings to make it make sense. Again, you have limitations, so you might not be able to reach that yourself, but you need to believe in your heart there must be a way to combine these verses to give a unified meaning that is accepted. And so there is no one verse in the Qur'an that disagrees or contradicts another verse. Would we even accept a book that is presented to us that has contradictory meanings? Because we'd be left with confusion, and I don't want to be left confused about what it means to believe in God. I don't want to be confused in a way that I'm saying, I think this is what I'm supposed to believe. I hope it's enough to go to paradise. I don't want that kind of doubt. I want to be sure I'm on the right path. I want to be sure I'm following and I am upon the same belief as Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I need to have a source that is reliable for me to follow. Therefore, both the verses that are muhkam and those that are mutashabih agree with each other and support each other, and it is impossible that they would disagree with each other. Impossible that they would disagree with each other in meaning. So then, that leaves us with a question, which is, do we take the verse of the Qur'an, all of them, literally or not? Because any statement, any word in Arabic or English, even if it's implicit, you've got a literal meaning and a non-literal meaning. When it comes to the Qur'an, do we have a type of rule? Or can we pick and choose which one we want to take literally and which one we don't want to take literally? You might say, I like the look of that literal meaning. I want to go for it. You might say, that doesn't really take my fancy. That person might say, well, actually, I think this might make more sense if we don't take it literally. What is it then? The answer is that we are obligated to take the verses of the Qur'an literally unless we have a religious reason not to. We are obligated to take the verse of the Qur'an literally unless there is a religious reason not to. So in terms of the explicit verses, is that even an option? They're all explicit anyway. There's no, shall we take it literally or not? They're all clear anyway. You take them all by their literal meanings. So what type of verse are we talking about then? The mutashabih ones, the implicit ones. Meaning then, wherever possible, take them literally. If you're not given a religious reason to not take it literally, then you take it literally. So, for example, in the Qur'an, it tells us that in paradise, there are going to be rivers of honey. In this life, do we ever have, or have we ever seen or come across an actual river of honey? No. So if someone said to you in this life, I saw a river of honey, you would have to say to them, that can't be literally what it is. Maybe you meant that there was water that was so sweet it tastes like honey. For example, you'd kind of have to assign some sort of non-literal meaning for it to make sense in this life. But in the hereafter, there's nothing stopping that being taken literally. There's nothing to suggest that that's not what it actually means. Therefore, in our hearts, we believe in paradise, there will actually be rivers of honey. It's not metaphorical, it's not figurative, it's literal. The Prophet ﷺ said, there are some people who, when they cross the bridge of the Sirat, from the changed earth, over hellfire just before paradise, how will they cross it? He said, in the blink of an eye. If I said, I need to pop my car, I'll be back in the blink of an eye, do I mean that literally? No. What I mean, I'll be back very quick, close to the blink of an eye. But the Prophet ﷺ, when he said that statement, there is no context to suggest he did not mean that literally. So we take it literally. Same then for the verses. What religious reason then would there be to stop us taking a verse literally? If the apparent wording of the verse contradicts another verse. If the literal wording of one verse, if you were to take it literally, would mean that it contradicts the muhkam verse, then you have to what? Not take it literally. You're forced to not give a literal meaning to it. We're going to give an example of that, inshallah, in a second. Is that clear? Or there is a religious reason, meaning a religious rule, like belief or the sound mind, that tells you that can't be what the verse says. That can't be what the verse means, sorry. So it's a religious reason. So how did the scholars of the Salaf and the Khalaf approach this? Who are the Salaf? The scholars that lived in the first 3 centuries after the Hijrah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They are known as the Salaf. They were praised by Prophet Muhammad for their knowledge and their diligence in following the religion. The majority of them, when they came across a verse that you should not take literally, they said, we believe in the verse. We believe it has a befitting meaning for God. So we do not deny it, we believe in it, and we believe it has a befitting meaning for Allah Ta'ala. And we say, we are not going to delve into its meaning, and Allah knows best what it means. Leave it at that. Came in Arabic, leave it in Arabic. We might even know what it means, but I'm not going to, let's say, take that step to say, I will tell you what it actually means. They'll say, we're going to stop there. And Allah knows best what it means. Most of the scholars of the Salaf did that. The later ones, meaning the Khalaf, they said, we're getting more of a need now with the rise of ignorance, the decrease of expertise of the Arabic language, the spread of Islam among non-Arabs, that we now need to give those ambiguous verses actual meanings to save others from misunderstanding them. So they said, we believe in that verse. It has a befitting meaning. Not the literal meaning, and I'll tell you what it actually means. Is it clear? Give an example then. So examples of verses that are muhkam and mutashabih. The first one on the left, an example of a muhkam verse, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. In Surah Ash-Shura, verse 11, Allah revealed this verse, which means there is absolutely nothing like Allah. Not in one way and not in every way. Meaning absolute dissimilarity between Allah and His creation. So the reader of that verse is not puzzled, is not left wondering, what does that mean? What came before and after to grant me the necessary knowledge of knowing what this verse means? Because it's clear and explicit. It's muhkam. The wording is clear in Arabic, and the meaning therefore is clear. And this is the type of verse we as Muslims use for our base about our belief in God. To say what? Allah doesn't resemble the creation. There is nothing like Allah. Allah is not like the humans. Allah is not like the angels. Allah is not like the sun and the moon and the stars and other things. Allah is not in a place and direction, because all of that would result in a similarity to the creation, and Allah informed us in an explicit verse is not like the creation. So any belief that contradicts this verse cannot be the correct belief. Any belief that one might have in their heart that suggests God is like the creation, like the humans, like the angels, like the animals in some way, would go against the muhkam verse. And that's the foundation of the book, meaning a person is not following the Qur'an, truly. And if they're not following the Qur'an, clearly they're not on the right path. As for an example of a mutashabih verse, we covered this in detail if you recall in the last session. Ar-Rahmanu ala al-arshi istawa. In Surah Taha, verse 5. Ar-Rahman refers to Allah. It's one of the names of God. Ala al-arsh. So there's some relation, if you like, between Allah and the arsh. In what way the word istawa has been used to describe that? Istawa in the Arabic language has 15 meanings. So off the bat, is it a muhkam verse or mutashabih verse? Mutashabih, implicit verse. Clearly it's not explicit, it's not got one meaning. That word in the Arabic language has 15 meanings. Among those meanings, if you recall, is to ripen, to mature, to be flat, to sit, to be established upon. And among the meanings are to have power over, to have control over. So clearly some meanings befit Allah, some meanings don't befit Allah. So if one said that the meaning of istawa in reference to God here is to be firmly established, meaning to be set upon something, like what Allah revealed about the ship of, or the ark of Prophet Nuh, when it landed on the mountain after the flood, Allah used the word istawa, which means landed on, set down upon the mountain, meaning firmly established upon. If that was the meaning about this verse, that Allah was firmly established upon the arsh, does that comply with this muhkam verse, or does it go against it? Is it sitting and being established upon among the attributes of the creation, amongst the attributes of humans, animals? A cow, doesn't it sit on the ground? A cat on the windowsill and the like. It needs to be physically attached to something else solid. That's what it means. If this was the meaning that was meant in the verse of the Qur'an, this would lead to contradictions. Hang on a minute, oh God. One minute you said you're not like the creation, another verse you're saying you are like the creation. One minute he said there's nothing like you, another verse is saying that you like animals and you like humans. Therefore, that cannot be the meaning of that verse. That Allah is firmly established or sitting on the arsh. So what? We've rejected the literal meaning. Thereafter, the two types of scholars, when they came to a verse like that, some said it means Allah controls the arsh. And we said, the arsh being used in this verse is for what wisdom? That since the arsh is the biggest of all the creations of God, by God revealing that He has control of the arsh, by definition and by default, Allah has control over the rest of creation. So this is praising God. By Allah informing us He has control over everything. Or one can say, and some scholars said, Allah has istiwa over the arsh, and Allah knows best what that means. I'm not going to delve into it. I'm not going to assign, I'm not even going to say control. I'm just going to say Allah knows best what it means, but it doesn't mean sit, and it doesn't mean physically be established over the arsh. That they still denied. And they stopped there. So how is that different to what some people come to you in English? And they present to you a translation. And they say, look, God said in the Qur'an, He's sitting on the arsh. And when you say no, that's not true, and they say, are you rejecting the Qur'an? You're saying the Qur'an is wrong. You're going against God. How do you answer that? What's a simple model answer? So what are you accepting and what are you rejecting? We accept the Arabic language and therefore we accept the verse. We didn't say the verse is wrong. We didn't say the revelation is incorrect. We believe in the verse. What's my issue? What you've claimed is the meaning. What you are putting forward as the proposed meaning of that verse, I am rejecting. They try to say to you, look, Ar-Rahmanu al-Arsh istawa, God sits on the throne, leave it as that. Don't think about what it means, but you've given a meaning for it. Why are you trying to understand what sit means? God sits in a way that befits His majesty. If you had said the verse was revealed in Arabic, and let's leave it in Arabic and not try to imagine it, we're on the same page. But you can't throw in something in English and then say, don't try to think about it. Because by giving a meaning in English, haven't they assigned one of the meanings? That one of those possible meanings, they've chosen the literal one. So they no longer kept it as it was revealed. They've given you their choice of those potential meanings. And now they want you to say, don't call me out for it. Don't tell me what problem or what is problematic about that meaning. Just take it. God revealed it like that. No, He didn't. God did not reveal about Himself He has a hand, or a face, or a shin, or fingers, or body parts, or places, or directions. Nowhere did God reveal that. Are there words in Arabic God revealed about Himself? Yes. Do you want to say leave them in Arabic and don't talk about them? If you want. Or do you want to discuss the potential meanings of them in Arabic? We can, as long as they agree with the other meanings. Otherwise, those people who say, brother, you need to take everything literally. Why are you trying to tamper with what God revealed? Who are you to say what to take literally and what not? We take everything literally. We're left with a scenario like this. The result of the claim that you have to take every verse by its literal meaning. That's the last slide, by the way. We've got a scholar, Al-Imam Al-Qushayri, may Allah have mercy on him. He lived centuries ago. He wrote a book called At-Tazkirah Al-Sharqiyya. He said, if it is said that Allah said in the Qur'an, Ar-Rahmanu ala al-arsh istawa, and it is an obligation to take every verse by its apparent meaning. And that is what some people say to us. God revealed this, you take it literally. So you say, and you can follow this blueprint with them. If that's the case, that you're telling me I have to take it literally, then we say to them, Allah also said in the Qur'an, وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ, which literally means what? Huwa, meaning He. Ma'akum is with you. أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ, wherever you are. And Allah also said in the Qur'an, أَلَا إِنَّهُ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ مُحِيطٌ, which literally says, God is encompassing everything. And so, this is his statement. If it is the case that you take the first verse by its apparent meaning, which is what? That God is on the throne. Literally what it says. If you go with you for a second, by your claim you would have to say God is on the throne there, because that's what the Ar-Rahman al-Arsh istawa literally says. And you say you got to take everything literally. Then we should take these verses by their apparent wordings as well. Let's take this literally as well then. You said that's the rule. And in that case, Allah would be above the arsh and with us, wherever we are, which is on the earth, and physically surrounding the universe all at one time. What an ugly belief you have put about God, up there and everywhere. And they would say to you, no, that verse means God knows about everything. His knowledge is everywhere. So you'll say, so you've not taken that verse literally then. And if you've not taken that literally, why are you stopping us from not taking this one literally? Didn't we say, right at the beginning of that first verse, there are those who want to pick and choose how they interpret verses to match their beliefs. They want to believe God's on the throne. And they'll find a verse that matches that. They don't want to believe God's on the earth. So if there's a verse that apparently suggests that, no, that verse means something else. And Allah warned us from using these types of verses for our basis, for our belief. Because one can say it means this and one can say it means that. And there's an ambiguity about what it might actually mean. Do I want to base my actual belief in Allah upon such a verse? No. Why am I doing it then? But that's what those people, they will not be able to find one muhkam verse that says Allah is on the arsh. Because there isn't one. And our belief is based on explicit verses, not on implicit verses. Even the implicit verses support the explicit ones, but that's not our basis. We're not running around saying, look at this implicit verse, it's got 15 meanings, I'm telling you it means this. Well, why have you gone for that one and you rejected the others? On what basis? And so Al-Qushayri then said, it is impossible that one existence could physically be in all these places at one time. And the scholar said, what leads to impossible is impossible. Therefore, it's impossible for you to take all these verses literally. Therefore, if we want to know about what the verse of the Qur'an mean, we understand our limitations, we understand there are different types of verses. Someone who wants to present to you a verse of the Qur'an as evidence of something being an attribute of God, or an attribute of the prophets, or they want to even tell you something is an obligation. Do I even want to leave that to chance? That maybe God ordered me with this, maybe not. Maybe this is haram, maybe not. It's not really clear for me. I want to know. What I am doing is what my Lord ordered me, and I'm doing it correctly. Or I'm leaving this out because I'm not supposed to do it as a Muslim. I want to then be relying on what is actually reliable, what is going to be clear for me. And those are the muhkam verses of the Qur'an. That's what we use for our basis, for our belief, for our correct understanding of the Qur'an. The scholars of Islam throughout the eras put effort into making sure the meanings of those verses were what were conveyed for us, so that we have a clear-cut, authentic and sound belief about Allah and His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, about which there is no ambiguity, backed up by evidence, backed up by the sound mind and the creed of the Muslim scholars throughout the eras. May Allah Ta'ala keep us steadfast upon that and grant us the good ending and the reward in the hereafter for all our good deeds. Ameen. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Any questions on anything we said or anything that wasn't clear? Farah.